So let's bring in King5 Steve Bunin, who is in the newsroom tracking the results. We're seeing some change in Wisconsin this morning. Steve, a lot of ballots being counted, and it's leaning towards Biden, right?
Yeah, tilting towards Biden in Wisconsin, and Michigan is expected to start tilting towards Biden as well, as votes come in both the Detroit and Lansing areas, and in Wisconsin, Milwaukee and Green Bay. And then Nevada is the other state we're watching. Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada. And in our election center here, we can try to show you the path to victory for Joe Biden. Now, again, you mentioned, Jake, the Associated Press has called Arizona for Biden, which is why it's in blue on our screen right here. But Joe Biden doesn't need to get Pennsylvania anymore, because if he gets Nevada, he gets up to 244. Again, you're looking for 270, gets you into the White House. Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes would give Biden 254. 16 out of Michigan gets him to the vaunted 270. Regardless of what happens in the other swing states, Georgia, North Carolina could both tilt for Biden, because Atlanta has some outstanding votes. In North Carolina, they're still bringing in the counties that have Charlotte and Raleigh, the two biggest counties in North Carolina, but they're not necessarily in play as long as Biden takes Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada. That gets him to the 270. Without those, this is where we stand right now. 238 for Biden, still a 25-vote lead in the Electoral College over the incumbent President Trump. Guys?
Steve, what can Joe Biden not afford to lose right now? What is the must-win for President Trump?
So that's a great way to look at it. We can go for President Trump. So if President Trump, you presume, let's say he holds on to Georgia, although that's no guarantee. We just talked about the votes in the big cities, Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh, and North Carolina. President Trump at that point overtakes Joe Biden. Let's say President Trump also takes Pennsylvania. That's where he gets to 264. But again, he needs to take one of those three states from Joe Biden. They're all leaning left as we go from the early morning hours to now. If President Trump takes any one of those, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Nevada, then President Trump gets 4 more years in the White House.
Thanks, Steve.
You got it.
Great use of technology, playing out different scenarios this morning. Let's get to Steve Bunin with a look at what's happening in Wisconsin, Michigan, just to name a couple of states that we are keeping a close eye on this morning. Steve?
Yeah, these battleground states that are really determining what's going to happen in the election. And by the way, at 69.5 million votes overall, Joe Biden has now eclipsed any total for any candidate in U.S. presidential history, thanks to this turnout that we're seeing that we haven't seen in about 100 years in our country. So you mentioned Michigan, and this just flipped within the last half hour or so. But remember, about 15 minutes ago, we checked into Michigan. It was about an 8,000 vote difference. Now, as more and more ballots continue to come in from Detroit and the Lansing areas, both lean left, Joe Biden now has opened up an 18,000 vote lead, again, out of about 5 million votes in Michigan, but he's up 18,000 votes. And so he has a little bit of a lead, expecting to extend that. And in Wisconsin, he flipped that around 2 a.m. So if you went to bed at midnight, you're kind of waking up in the last 15 minutes. Wisconsin turned blue, and now Joe Biden up about 21,000 votes over President Trump. If he takes Michigan, and if Biden also takes Wisconsin, and he takes Nevada, he gets to 270 electoral college votes, no matter what happens in Pennsylvania, Georgia, or the others. And Joe Biden has an 8,000 vote lead over President Trump in Nevada, with the votes still coming in, mostly in Clark County. That's Las Vegas, as well as mail-in ballots, which tend to lean Democrat as well. So it's looking very good for Joe Biden right now, as long as he holds on to what is now an official lead in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada. And the other big thing about Michigan that we're watching right now at this hour, we talked about how the votes have been changing. Well, this is the same thing for the U.S. Senate race there, where the incumbent Gary Peters, the Democrat, has been trailing John James, the Republican, for the entire night. But now that margin is down to just 25,000 votes, as these votes again continue to come in from Detroit and Lansing. So we're watching that, because that could help tilt the balance of power to the Democrats if they can win a few more Senate seats.
Steve Bunin all over it this morning, with a lot of votes left to be counted. Thanks, Steve. Let's bring in King5 Steve Bunin this morning, live in the newsroom, tracking the historical election unfolding before us here, buddy. Let's take a look at some of these battleground states yet to be counted, Steve. What are you learning?
Yeah, because that's the path to victory, and this is based on the Associated Press's numbers in our election center. So Arizona has been called by the Associated Press for the Democrats for Joe Biden, and same situation for Maine. So that leaves 6 battleground states. And the issue for President Trump, who, when he said that, I don't want any more votes counted in the middle of the night at 4 a.m., he was in the lead in some of these states. But let me show you why that would come back to haunt him. So let's say that President Trump holds on to the leads he has right now in Georgia, in North Carolina. You can see he would overtake in the Electoral College, and in Pennsylvania. That only gets him to 264. And as you mentioned, you need 270 to win. And that's why we're watching these 3 states, because if Joe Biden, with holds on to his current lead in Michigan, or adds to it as he's expected to, and pulls up to Wisconsin. That gets to the virtual tie, and then the 6 Electoral College votes in Nevada give Biden the presidency for the exact number at 270. And that's if Joe Biden doesn't overtake President Trump in Georgia, where they're getting votes, mail-in votes, primarily in the Atlanta area, mail-in votes coming in the North Carolina, big areas around Charlotte and Raleigh, and in Pennsylvania as well. So if any of those flip, then it becomes a more sizable victory for Joe Biden. But this is the path to victory for the former vice president. Keep your lead in Michigan, keep it in Wisconsin, keep it in Nevada, and you ascend to the White House.
And again, Steve, these are the votes yet to be counted are in a lot of these urban centers, right? And that tends to bode well for the Democrats when you talk about those big cities.
That's right, and especially because when you add the fact that the mail-in votes tend to lean towards the Democrat. When we had these votes coming in early, they tended to lean towards the Democrats. That also helps Joe Biden. And you'd go state by state for the popular vote. You can jump into Michigan and see that Biden now has a 10,000 vote lead over President Trump. The more ballots that come in, mail-in ballots for people who live in the Detroit area, in the Lansing area, that helps Joe Biden. Same situation for Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Wisconsin, with Joe Biden now with a 21,000 vote advantage in Wisconsin, and then finally get to Nevada, where he's got an 8,000 vote lead, and the votes that are outstanding are the ones in Clark County. That's Las Vegas, and again, whether those are people who came up or people who mailed in, all of those tilt towards Joe Biden. So that's how he's got to 69.5 million votes, the most for any candidate ever, and I believe the number is 160 million votes overall. That's also a record for our country, with a 70% turnout. Let me see, 67% turnout. That's the highest since 1900.
Oh, wow. That's the first I've heard that. Interesting. Steve Bunin with the cool tools this morning. Thanks.